I never thought that I would be a writer. Obviously, I had amazing stories in my head, or at least I thought those stories to be amazing when I used to have these toys which are called GI Joes, and I used to battle them and have these intricate plot lines in my head as to how they are scaling a mountain while they're just scaling my fingers and all of that jazz, as kids do. So that story was always there in my head, but I think after I finished A Song of Ice and Fire, I desperately wanted to read something similar in an Indian setting, and it was very interesting and surprising that my search came up empty. And I'm a very decent, I know this will sound narcissistic and self-obsessed, but I'm a very decent researcher in the field of law. So I did go deep dive into the Indian library situation, and I was like, okay, there is no epic grimdark fantasy which exists in India, which is so strange and bizarre. We are currently, and it's nothing to be proud of, but the most populated country in the world. Surely someone came up with a grimdark fantasy series.
What is up, everybody? You're listening to episode 141 of SFF Addicts. I'm your host, Adrian M. Gibson, and welcome to your weekly dive into the world of science fiction, fantasy, and writing craft. Joining me this week is my co-host, my bestie from the Midwestie, the queen of my days, my dear Greta Kelly. How are you doing?
I'm good. How are you doing?
Doing very well today. Thank you. And it always makes me smile to see you smile when I call you the queen of my days. So
I'm going to get it on a t-shirt someday.
Right. Speaking of which, go support my Queen of Days by buying The Queen of Days, her novel, the latest one, in paperback. And that's the newest format, but you can also get it in hardcover, audiobook, all that jazz. Go support this wonderful human being and get yourself a fun fantasy heist where a group of rapscallions takes on a god in a very fun novel.
And while you're at it, go and support Adrian and get his beautiful book, Baby Mushroom Blues. It's that perfect blend of sci-fi and mystery. There's mushroom people and gritty politics, mayhem, thieves, murder, all the things you want out of a book. What are you waiting for? Do the thing.
And speaking of thieves, go support MJ so she doesn't have to work her day job anymore, and she can just write awesome books like Among Thieves and its sequel, Thick Ass Thieves, because she's a wonderful human being and nobody wants to be a part-time writer.
That is not the dream.
That is not the dream. I mean, for some people it's okay, but yeah. As well, a quick note for listeners, you can support SFF Addicts on Patreon for a ton of cool extras like bonus episodes, author readings, and more. So check the links in the description to support what we do here. Also, don't forget to rate and review the podcast on your favorite podcast app and subscribe to the FanFiAddict YouTube channel where this and every other episode of the show is available in full video. And now welcoming to the podcast for the first time, Gourav Mohanty, author of Sons of Darkness and the soon-to-be-released Dance of Shadows. How are you, my friend?
Namaste everyone, I'm Gourav Mohanty, and I am so happy and excited to again meet my Worldcon pals, who are my drinking buddies, wingmen, and just partners in crime. I'm just so excited to just have this conversation and chat and, just get talking about the book and everything you guys have to ask me. I'm just hoping that you guys have not planned any trap and, to get me into trouble, but I'm really looking forward to
that's what we do here on this podcast. Like, haha, I got you.
With your mushroom blue mysteries and heists, and, yes. And of course with MJ's thieves, it's a very shitty group of people to have a podcast
sneaky. On. So. You're not sneaky enough for this podcast, Gourav. All right, well, let's get a little bit more of an introduction. If anyone's not familiar with you, your work, if you can tell everyone a bit about yourself.
Sure. I am Gourav Mohanty. As I said, I'm popularly known in the Worldcon community as Cinnamon Bun of Doom. That's a name that hasn't caught on yet, luckily. I write epic grimdark fantasy. I'm a lawyer by profession. I also do stand-up comedy on the side. I'm based in India right now, and my second book, Dance of Shadows, is going to come out in February, and I'm going to figure out if I'm going to be a one-hit success like Stacy's mom or go out to Linkin Park my way through the fantasy series. So let's see how this works out.
Okay, so that's what we got. Comps. Like, yeah. Your career comps: Stacy's mom or Linkin Park.
Linkin Park, yeah. Like, these are just two extremes that I have to roll between.
Those are the only options.
Brilliant, dude. Also, deep Stacy's mom. Yeah. That was like my childhood, man.
I'm a 90s kid through and through, so yeah. I'm glad. I hope some people, your audience, catches that reference.
Yeah.
I'm sure they will.
Back before we knew what a MILF was. The quintessential MILF song.
I mean, The Graduate came out long before then. There's always been MILFs.
True. Before we dig deeper into the episode, a quick word from our sponsor. Welcome to Transference, where death and sickness are but a distant memory. Nicholas Five Boroughs is a sicko, someone that takes on others' illnesses. In a city where diseases can be transferred, the rich buy longer lives without pain, and the poor get a short life of constant sickness. Brought back from the brink of death by his friend Brian Meadowhearth, or maybe the invisible hand of an outside actor, Nick finally gets the chance to try and change things, to finally stop the whole disease transfer network. Tensions escalate as Nick infiltrates a higher society he doesn't understand, and starts to fall for Dorothy Sungate, the very person he needs to manipulate to be successful. And between run-ins with a talking cat, genetically modified humans, and a robotic police force, the world around him just keeps getting stranger. Can Nicholas tear down the disease transfer architecture? And how much of his humanity is he willing to bargain along the way? A dystopian vision of healthcare and a market economy, Transference will appeal to fans of Red Rising, Blade Runner, and the BioShock franchise. Soon to be a complete duology with the release of Transcendence in the summer of 2025. Transference by Ian Patterson is available now in paperback and ebook. Get your copy today. And now, enjoy the rest of this episode of SFF Addicts.
But we'd love to dive into like your nerdy origin. So tell the listeners what first got you into science fiction, fantasy. Was it something you read or saw when you were a kid, or did you come to genre fiction a little bit later in life?
So fiction as a genre was something which I discovered when I stole a book from my mother's library. And it was a book which I read and I thought that was magic because I did not know, I was way too young to read that book. It was Sidney Sheldon's Tell Me Your Dreams. Okay, it's again a big popular 90s novel, and it dealt with a serial killer who had multiple personality disorder. And for me at that age, this was magic and this was so epic. And I tried to think that maybe I also have multiple personality disorder. It would be so cool to have a multiple personality disorder. I was an idiot then, obviously, of elephantine proportions. But I think that got me into fiction as a whole. I've obviously grown with mythological tales, and I think we'll get into that a little later. But Sidney Sheldon was my doorway into fiction as a genre. And then I went through Oscar Wilde's Picture of Dorian Gray, which till date remains one of the most monumental books that have changed the course of my life, because the philosophies, I think it's a book on philosophy, I think it's always called a fiction book, which is written by one of the greatest, but I just love the philosophy of hedonism that is there in it and how he critiques it himself. And I think from there on, the journey towards fiction started. But my tryst with fantasy, unfortunately, came a lot later in my life. It came in law school. Because I was traveling by train, and from my law school back to my home journey, it's a 36-hour train journey. And I thought, okay, and we didn't have HBO then, okay, in India. So we used to download things illegally from torrent websites. I know you guys do not have these third world troubles around then, but we used to. So I downloaded something which looked interesting, a Game of Thrones. What is this? Okay, it hasn't caught on. No one knows about this. So I downloaded Game of Thrones first episode. And I watched it in the train, and it blew my mind. I was like, what is this? This is unbelievably awesome. And I finished the entire season on the train journey, and I realized there is no second season. And then I realized that there's a book series. And from there on, I've never looked back. It's been a beautiful, rolling down that rabbit hole of epic fantasy. And it just grew better and better. So, yeah.
Amazing. And dude, I live in Ecuador, so I know about torrents. Don't you worry. It's like, man, there are like super sketchy like movie stores here where it's like all the movies. You can buy like a movie for $1 and it's all on like, like a blank DVD, all that stuff. Like basically it's just a store where people torrent stuff and sell it to other people.
Okay. So, I'm so grateful to those guys. Because of you guys, we could watch those movies here back in India. So I love how globalization has helped us all come together.
Beautiful story.
Yeah. The good side of capitalism and a market economy is great. Well, dude, I love how you I mean, technically you didn't steal. It's like you borrowed. You gave that book back to your mom. But you started off with like books about serial killers and multiple personality disorders and stuff like that. And then you transitioned to Game of Thrones when you're a bit older. But like, did you know at any point, like, I want to start writing myself? I want to be a writer. How did that kind of part of your life unfold?
I think I never thought that I would be a writer. Obviously, I had amazing stories in my head, or at least I thought those stories to be amazing when I used to have these toys which are called GI Joes, and I used to battle them and have these intricate plot lines in my head as to how they are scaling a mountain while they're just scaling my fingers and all of that jazz, as kids do. So that story was always there in my head. But I think after I finished A Song of Ice and Fire, I desperately wanted to read something similar in an Indian setting, and it was very interesting and surprising that my search came up empty. And I'm a very decent, I know this will sound narcissistic and self-obsessed, but I'm a very decent researcher in the field of law. So I did go deep dive into the Indian library situation, and I was like, okay, there is no epic grimdark fantasy which exists in India, which is so strange and bizarre. We are currently, and it's nothing to be proud of, but the most populated country in the world. Surely someone came up with a grimdark fantasy series, but somehow that genre has frozen in time, around the independence era and whatnot. We'll get into that. But so I thought, and incidentally, around the same time, we have Toni Morrison as compulsory reading material in law school. And this was my 5th year. And I read a quote by her, and I'm paraphrasing, where she said that if you want to read a book which has not been written yet, it's your duty to write it. Right. And in a very cinematic Bollywood moment for me, like, there was a spotlight on my face. I'm like, okay, I'm going to give it a shot. My job was already confirmed. I'm like, I'll give it a shot. I just wanted to write one scene, and from one scene to another scene. And before I knew it, I was Thanos, snapping my fingers and torturing people in my book. And I was thoroughly enjoying that process. And and from there on, the writing journey began. I never thought I would become a writer, It was just this journey, this hobby, which I was really enjoying, my own personal Dungeons and Dragons. But once I reached the last chapter and I looked back, I'm like, whoa, that's over. It's complete. Maybe I'm a writer.
Toni Morrison unleashed a monster.
Yes. What have you done?
What have you done, Toni?
You have so much to answer for. Well, I love that you mentioned that you're a lawyer, because it's something of a trend among our recent guests.
We had so many lawyers, like so many lawyers turn writers. It's crazy.
So can you tell us a little bit more about that aspect of your life? And do you think it prepared you in any way to get into traditional publishing?
To get into traditional publishing, that was a difficult journey. But I think as a lawyer, when you say that so many lawyers are getting into fantasy, I completely understand and relate to that, because their life becomes so drab and gray that fantasy somehow provides them this rainbow color that they can delve into. And I think that the fact that they can't, have a comeback to a judge, and they have to be like so subservient and just say, yes, my lord, and all of that jazz. So I think they really unleash themselves in the books they write. But jokes aside, I think being a lawyer, having one of the things which I do, I'm a lawyer who practices before courts. Basically, I'm trying to manipulate a judge and convince him to listen to me, to listen to my case. And storytellers are at their core manipulators. They're trying to convince the readers about something, and at least in the genre in which I write. And they will use subverting tactics and lead them somewhere else and make them very happy about having the predictions wrong. So I think maybe that did help in writing, but the greatest way being a lawyer helped me in writing was make my life a living hell in my office, so that I really looked forward to writing in the VR of it.
I understand that. I worked in finance when I was writing my first book, so I deeply understand.
You need a yin and yang balance. The more they push you somewhere else, so you're like, okay, the more beautiful worlds or grim worlds you create. So
yeah.
Is that why you torture your characters so much? Because
I think so. Maybe once I head into therapy, I think this is the result that will come out. That all your bosses are basically your characters. But I have not discovered that yet. But possibly.
Oh my god! So in that sense, like, I guess the work that you did in law and working in a law office and courts and that kind of stuff, this sort of storytelling skills that you developed through that, I guess, how much did that help you kind of creating the complex political landscape that exists in your books? You're saying like you're trying to manipulate a judge, but at the end of the day, it's like a lot of the times you are subservient to this system, this institution of law.
Yeah.
But in your books, you can do whatever the fuck you want.
Yeah.
You can make things as messy as you want.
But now that I'm thinking back, I hope none of the judges I appear before watch this video. They think I'm manipulating them. I'm never winning a case again. That aside, you're absolutely right that when you go before a judge, you are weaving a story. You have a very limited time to do this, and you are supposed to structure the story in such a way that you arrive at your point and with the case laws you need. And because there are two people who are arguing the same set of facts, but someone is saying it should lead to point A, and I am trying to say that it should lead to point B. I think that structure in my head helped me frame the arguments in my book, and especially because I do have a courtroom battle scene in Sons of Darkness. So that was direct application of knowledge and twisting of laws that we generally do. But if I were to completely go in Zen mode and look at my life in a prism, I'll say that I think the work ethic that comes from working in a law firm really helped in I don't know, at least meeting my deadlines, because I'm a lot faster than George R.R. Martin, according to my publisher.
And your books are just as chunky.
Yeah.
Your books are just as chunky as his. So.
Well, I imagine that your experience in stand-up also kind of feeds into that, like being able to tell a story in like a small space of time and influence audiences. I don't know, there's got to be some kind of through line there, don't you think?
Yeah, I think so too, because I think when people tell me that, you have these 3 different careers which you follow, and they're so starkly, they fall in different spheres of life. I just think that no, there's this common thread of storytelling which connects them all. Where you're again trying to convince someone using your oratory skills or writing skills that hey, this is my version of story. Here, listen to this, and then I'll suddenly subvert your expectation. And because comedy at the core, it's basically shocking your mind, because you're going in a certain template and suddenly you say something different, and that shocks your brain, and the brain's reaction is to laugh. That is what the science of it is in the center. But interestingly, stand-up comedy started way after my writing journey started, because stand-up comedy was a bucket list item which I had. And, pandemic made everyone chase their bucket lists because they realized that, you just got one life. And so I decided to go for an open mic competition. And I somehow, because of, I don't know, maybe someone rigged that competition, but I ended up winning it. And then that validation kind of really helped in going out there. And, I'm a big PG Woodhouse fan. I love dry humor, and I'm just happy that I get to use that comedy in my writing as well as in my stand-up sets. Not in my law firm, though, because if you try to make a judge laugh, it's not going to help you.
Yeah, 2 out of
Maybe
3.
a jury. Yeah, like a jury might be okay with a little laugh.
We don't have jury system in India. So it was abolished by, we realized that people are too amenable to corruption and their own views. So we decided to dispense away with it.
Yeah. Interesting. So you have a 1-person audience when you're in the court.
Yeah. Or 2-person audience, depending on the judge, or sometimes 3.
Right.
But, we had a jury trial before till around 1958, but then a very famous captain shot the guy his wife was cheating on with. And it was clearly, he admitted his guilt, but the jury felt so moved by his story that they acquitted him. And after that, the government realized that we can't trust the emotions of Indians, so let them. So that's a history lesson there.
Crazy, man. That's wild. If anyone wants to see any of Gourav's stand-up, just go check out his Instagram. He's got some reels and stuff like that, and it's really funny. But at the same time, watching your stand-up is also fascinating for me, because I don't come from India. I've been to India, but I haven't grown up in that culture. And you spoke about your sense of humor being a bit more dry, but also very referential to things that Indian people will understand. So how do you kind of tune your humor to obviously be true to yourself, but kind of playing off of the Indian audiences? And how do you kind of bring that sort of humor and levity into what, grimdark fantasy?
That is such a politically relevant question, especially in the current Indian climate, because the world in which stand-up comics are living in India right now is very grimdark. Comics are getting beaten left, right, and center because everyone has become really sensitive, especially when you joke about something which is politically, not motivated, politically inclined, or if it has to do anything with religion. Someone might take offense and really go out there at you, and then they end up becoming very famous. It's an interesting spiral that's there. But so nowadays, a lot of people say that stand-up in India, that comics need lawyers for sure, because it's become a very hazy world, and I'm glad I have both these qualifications in my resume, which really helps. But talking about tuning the humor, what I mostly try and do when I'm crafting a joke set is that I hope it's not way too intellectual sometimes. Sometimes it just, because when you're reading a book, you can look at the joke and it marinates in your head and you understand it and you laugh, right? But when you are actually saying it out loud and then you move on to the next joke, you are not giving the audience enough time to simmer in it. So this is where my writing habit clashes with my stand-up comedy habit, because in writing you can let the reader assimilate the joke at his own speed and time, but you don't have that luxury of time when you're performing a set on stage. So that's something which I really enjoy. But tuning up humor, I don't know, I just cite the jokes to my friends, and if they laugh, I think it's fine, and then I just go for it.
So your friends are kind of like your, because obviously it's like open mic is like a way to test your material.
Yeah.
But you can also do that with your friends before you even hit the stage.
Absolutely. Yeah,
which is really beneficial.
You have beta readers even when it comes to stand-up comedy. So, yeah. So they're definitely. I call them.
You got your beta audience.
Yeah. So I'll call them up. Like, do you want a break from your office time? Like, okay. Then I will tell them the jokes. I'll cite them out, and by the reactions, I understand. Okay, which joke is working.
Nice.
Which joke is landing. So.
I love it, man.
Well, before we dive into your books in more in-depth, because we really want to dive in and talk more, could you give us a brief pitch of the series? And I'm going to pronounce this wrong because I cannot roll my R's. Raag of Rta.
Oh, that was amazing.
You got it.
That was beautifully done, and I think we just spoke about it, and I'm going to repeat that because my narrator of Dance of Shadows was just sent me an audio sample where he pronounced my series name as Raag of Rta, and I was mortified. I was like, I hope you've not done that across. It's not an abbreviation.
It's not a fucking acronym. Come
on. But that was beautifully done, Greta.
Thank you.
Wow.
Way to go, girl.
So Raag of Rta, the pitch that I can give is, I think, if you imagine maybe PG Woodhouse as the chef, and he is mixing the masala of the cozy fantasy vibes of A Song of Ice and Fire and the brotherly love of HBO Succession, and spread it over this ancient Indian landscape, which is, I don't know, rife with a magic system based on millennia-old concepts of mandalas, yogas, and chakras, or in short, Naruto. So I think, if you combine all of that, I think that's what you get. The Raag of Rta is all about. I need to, work on my elevator pitch. But yeah, this is the basic description of the Raag of Rta. It's a dark reimagination of an ancient Indian epic poem called the Mahabharata, which is the longest epic poem in the world. It is 16 times the size of Iliad and Odyssey combined. So I've just taken a particular tale from that folklore and I've just reimagined it in my own what-if scenario.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I like how you use cozy fantasy. He's being sarcastic there, people. Cozy fantasy of A Song of Ice and Fire and the brotherly love of Succession. If you've seen either of those, you know what the truth is. But, we'll get into sort of like the mythological aspects of the series in next episode in our masterclass. But I wanted to get your take on you're saying like the ways in which fantasy, especially grimdark fantasy, relates to India and Indian readers, and how that party kind of arrived quite late. And it was probably Game of Thrones, the TV show, that brought it to India in a lot of ways, I would imagine. But for you in particular, like, what was the significance of writing grimdark fantasy, kind of taking Toni Morrison's advice and being like, what do I want to see? I want to see grimdark fantasy. I want to see A Song of Ice and Fire style fantasy set in India, and sort of like representing your country in the minds of readers across the world, now that your book has reached so many people in different countries who know nothing about India, who have no relation to India.
I mean, that's just so beautifully put, and I love the patriotic fervor that carries. But when I was writing the book, honestly, I did not know that I was carrying such a flag on my shoulder at that point of time and running across the finishing line or something. Because for me at that point of time, I just couldn't find any dark fantasy novels or grimdark fantasy based in India. And I thought, okay, I'll just give it a shot. But when I first met my publisher and we did a comparative market research, we realized that you do not have a contemporary of this book in the Indian setup, which surprised me a lot, because India, I believe, is the cradle of the fantasy genre. The magic systems that our mythological tales deal with, or even the medieval tales deal with, are filled with amazing magic system that Robert Jordan borrowed heavily from when it came to the Wheel of Time series. In fact, when I first read The Eye of the World, I was like, okay, wait, these are Hindu concepts. These are all concepts taken from the Hindu religion, especially the male and feminine energy. That is core philosophy of the Hindu philosophy, in the Hindu religion. And he's done it so beautifully. He's done it amazing justice. And I'm like, okay, if he can do it, why aren't we doing it? We have amazing novelists out there, by the way. Let me not say that there are not amazing novelists out there, but because of the lack of infrastructure, maybe the publishing world is a little too scared of chunky novels, because that was the first reaction I got when I pitched Sons of Darkness. They're like, okay, we love the book, but can you cut it into 3? Like, what? No,
and your book is not even that long. Like, cut it into 2.
Maybe, I showed them, like Dance of Dragons of George R. R. Martin. I'm like, look at the size of this. Game of Sons of Darkness looks like a baby compared to it, and it has done so well. So I had a hard time initially convincing them to try the epic fantasy genre. Even now, the epic fantasy genre still hasn't taken its root. People have started coming into fantasy, but initially, the first writers, when I was researching, they started calling themselves as, I think it's called speculative fiction, spec fic, rather than this fantasy tag, because they knew that if they go to publishers with the fantasy tag, I don't know, is it looked down upon? I'm not quite sure what the whole game was, but so once Sons of Darkness did well, right? Many novels have started coming out. People are taking on fantasy. Like I see bookstagrammers in India taking on fantasy. Some people read Sons of Darkness, read my interview, and are trying Lies of Locke Lamora. And I am petrified. I'm like, don't read that, because you will know that my book is nothing compared to that beautiful piece. Because you start comparing. I'm like, okay, maybe just start slow. Maybe read Sanderson Elantris first, and then like scale up all the way to Locke Lamora. Right? But it's amazing. I love the fact that, because that's how the world of writing is so beautiful, because authors are not competitors, they're collaborators. Like, let's say if my book works, or someone else, like, they will read similar books then. So, we all succeed in that sense. So I'm really glad that at least a lot of fantasy readers in India who also were looking for something similar, who keep sending me these DMs, which make me so happy that, thank you, Gourav, you've been always looking for something set in an ancient Indian world. And, you did something on those lines. I'm like, thank you for making my day. This feels great. And then I will screenshot that and send that to my dad, so that he knows that I've taken the right choice of leaving my law career on the side and I'm doing something.
This is a real thing, Dad. I swear.
Yeah. It happens.
Look at me now, Dad.
So that definitely helps. But I'm just really happy, again, to go back to the same point that I don't know, maybe history will look at me as the guy who opened the door to Grimdark fantasy, which will be epic. Or history will look at me as someone who got jailed for the violent writings he has written, because someone decided to lynch me. I don't know. It can go either way, but we'll see.
Because you've broken no hearts by the ending of
Stacey's mom,
of Darkness.
Linkin Park. Who knows which way it will go. But I've talked to Samit Basu about that as well, just like how strange the Indian SFF market is, and like you're saying spec fic. It's like, why does a fantasy author have to say they're spec fic? And like he kind of broke down a lot of doors, like Absolutely. Especially on the science fiction side of things, and with superheroes and whatnot. But man, it's such a strange thing to think that like the most populated country in the world has such a different relationship with fiction, right. At least in terms of like what we're used to.
Here. No, absolutely. And like we have Salman Rushdie, by the way, who was written Midnight Children, which is actually it has so many fantastical elements, and it went on to win the Booker, dispelling norms that fantasy can't go and win something, which is the hobnobs or the posh people of book sphere who think that okay, we won't read fantasy, that thing which exists. He kind of broke down those walls. But when you research deep down into this, you realize that when the Britishers were there in India, right, and when they had colonized different parts of the world, they looked at Greek literature, the Greek mythology, because they knew that language. Latin was a common root from where they were. It was easy for them to learn Greek. And there were a lot of translations that followed. And then Greek mythology became high literature in Oxford and Eton. Right? It became something to look forward to. Now, Sanskrit, which is considered the mother of all languages, they did not understand that language. They thought it was the language of heathens. And so suddenly there was a colonial mindset that came in, that any folklore that dealt with snakes or, this hybrid races and magic system kind of shows how we are very backward in the way we think, rather than the beautiful imagination of our ancestors. So there was a bit of shame that followed, following which, post-independence, we didn't have any book that dealt with any concept of magic. Of course, there were movies that came out and there were books, but none of them really went on to become something which is ingrained in the memory of all of us as classics. But that is slowly going back. Like, people are shedding away from it. India is also very unique in the world that our mythology is still our religion. The Greeks don't worship their gods anymore, but Krishna, who's one of the most Machiavellian characters in my book, my mother worships him in the evening, right? So it conflates these two things because I'm writing about something who's still actively worshipped, and in that sense, our civilization has this one root, unbroken thread all the way back to the BC till now, and which is amazing in its own way. But because of the colonial era period, and I'm not trying to say that that was a bad thing or a good thing, but because of that period, suddenly literature in this area went down. So there might be a systemic cause behind it. At least that's what my theory is. Hopefully someone does a PhD on it. But until then, this is my theory. But I'm glad that we are open those doors and introducing fantasy to the Indian audience again.
Me too.
That's great. And there truly are, there's a character in the series for everyone. If there's someone you're looking to see that you would like to emulate, there's someone in these books because they're so full of really wonderful point of view characters and also side characters. And just like, how did you as an author manage to do that? Because it's a huge amount of work that you must have put into making everyone feel real. And they do really feel like very real human people that you might know. How did you do it?
Thank you, Greta. I mean, it's like a dinner party where everyone's of different temperaments have come in and you have to give equal spotlight to each one of them in a family dinner and something on those lines. But I think that's the beautiful aspect of mythology. Most mythological takes, like Greek mythology or Egyptian mythology or Indian mythology, what we love about it is the wide assortment of characters that you get, that you can choose the hero which you want. It's like playing a PS4 game and not being stuck with one character. You choose which character you want to start your quest with, right? And that kind of really allows you to feel that, okay, you have an element of choice in it, which is very liberating in its own way. And this is something which I really liked reading when I was reading A Song of Ice and Fire. I mean, you ask any person who your top 3 characters from A Song of Ice and Fire is, and they will all have maybe some common answers, but there will be some difference in their rankings because of the assortment. So I think I wanted to do that as well. Like, this is what I wanted to read about. And Indian mythology, again, has a lot of characters. And I created a lot of my own characters. Balancing them was a tough act. It was like walking a tightrope and you are holding just way too many buckets on the handle. But I think... this will sound funny, but I think we go back to Sydney Sheldon again, where I just felt like these are my multiple personalities and I'm just trying to deal with all of them. So I think it's a childhood dream which finally came true. So
it's like infusing a little bit of yourself into every character.
Yeah, I think so. A lot of people say that when you're writing or when you're playing someone on a theater, on a stage, you kind of slip into the skin of those characters. I think I just split my own character into all of these people that I'd written about. So, and it helped me formulate organic responses, I suppose, and gave way too much of a window to my readers into my own personality, which is
that always happens.
Which character, like, for you is the closest to your heart, though?
Closest to my heart. Okay. What
choose
I
between
am.
your children.
This is like the Sophie's Choice of Grimdark. That's great.
But I think in Crown they had this one scene where they say that every parent has one favorite child, even though they will never admit it. But I agree. What I feel like in personality, I'm very similar to Krishna. Like, his responses were exactly what I would respond. And then what I'd want to be is Karna, who's like the Jon Snow of Indian mythology. So these are the 2 characters who I loved writing. Mati was everything which I loved about Oscar Wilde's Dorian Gray. She has absolutely no conscience. This is one quote which I can't believe 8th standard Gourav had written in his school diary. It said, "Conscience is nothing but a front for cowardice. Morality is nothing but a fear of society." I'm like, why was I writing all these things when I was in school? But these core philosophies are embedded into Mati's character, and I think that's why a lot of people like Mati is this pirate princess from Sons of Darkness, for those who haven't read. And it was amazing to just go at it, like, when you can live your life without any thought for consequences for your action, which I do a lot of times. So it was a lot of fun to explore that and dial it up by 10.
Amazing, man. And how did you use all those characters? Because like there's complex world building and sort of like political machinations that are going on all over the place. How do you use the characters to kind of help illuminate those details and flesh out the world?
I've always been interested in PS4 games. I love the way in Assassin's Creed when a character is moving through a city and you're discovering the world from their eyes, and that's what I wanted to do. Of course, I mean, in my head, I'm making this sound as if I'm this erudite writer who has mastered it, like Stephen King or something. But at least that was the goal in my head. You know, sometimes when you aim for the stars, you will land somewhere in the moon. It was that sort of a thing, and hopefully, I become better at the craft. But this is what I started with. I wanted. The cities that I created in my because there are so many different city states with very different characters. I wanted my anti-heroes who are there. I wanted the world to be discovered from their eyes, not the entire thing in one go, but just give it that flavor where in one city state there's a lot of freedom which is given to women, in other city state there isn't. So how do you discover that? I didn't want to say it out loud, okay, this city is where women do not have that much rights, but show it, that the fact that the woman can't go out at night without an escort, that kind of adds to the element without really shoving it down the throat of someone. So I think these are the things which I tried to do. Now that I look back, I can create a theory, but when I was writing, I did not know anything. I was just going with the flow. But when I came to my second book, and by this time I had obviously looked at Brandon Sanderson's classes online, and I had read The Art of Writing, I think, by Stephen King. And suddenly I realized that a lot of things I was doing have a name to it, and there are structures which are involved. And so I'm glad that I was able to build on that, at least for Dance of Shadows.
Yeah,
Oh, I don't know how many questions I answered there. I think sometimes I'm a lawyer, okay? So I think we sometimes go on and on. Please feel free to stop.
Dude, that Assassin's Creed reference is so good though, because I love the ways in which a POV character can kind of analogous between video games and books and movies and stuff like that. It's like the lens through which you view a story in the world reveals so much about the world. And there's so many cool locales in your series, and like, especially because you have different characters in different cities, you're able to highlight these unique perspectives on these different locations. Are there any cities or settings that you really, really loved writing about, and like maybe in conjunction with like, I loved the way this character perceived this place?
Right. The fun thing about the cities mentioned in my book is that they did exist in reality in ancient India. Now their names are all different, but they did exist. Now no one knows how they looked and what the character of those cities were. So it gave me a free hand in devising them. So I really, there's a city called Hastinapur, which is in the north. It's a city like Rome. It has a big history. Even in India, Delhi is called the seventh avatar of the old city of Hastinapur, which existed during the Mahabharata time. So there have been 7 cities. And Rome also has a very similar mythology, that Rome has been built over and above each other. So, yeah. So I think from that perspective, I loved building. I think this is where I was very inspired from Steven Erikson, where he gave mythologies to cities itself. And that is something he's an archaeologist, so he does it so beautifully. My lawyer skills can only take me so far.
It's quite daunting in general, like exactly. delving into Malazan.
Right? I know. See, because when you generally read, a lot of people will say the descriptions of buildings are so boring, and many of the time they are right. But the way Steven Erikson does it, it's just, I can't believe he makes floor plans. Because I love the way he writes. The city which I really enjoyed building was Hastinapur, because India has a very prevalent caste system. We did not have the systemic use of racism as has existed in US and UK and a lot of the other countries, where there was a difference between Africans and the whites, the traditional distinction. But in India, we had a concept of 4 different castes. There was a warrior caste, there was a priestly caste, there was a merchant caste, and there was this rest. And then there was again a caste which were called the untouchables. And this is also enshrined in a lot of our lore and is still prevalent right now. Because we have, in US, you have affirmation action for blacks, like you have reservations or something on those lines in Harvard, and I think that has been taken down now, but something on
affirmative action for African Americans, and many other right. races in the States, but then
groups,
and then reservations for indigenous peoples.
Mm-hmm. Correct. So we have a very similar system for scheduled castes and tribes who were the, in quotes, the castes which were at the bottom rung of the ladder in the medieval and the ancient times. So the caste system has been very prevalent, and especially in that city. So to create a city's geography which was divided as per those castes was something which was a reflection of the history, as well as it gave a lot of character to that city. So that is something I really enjoyed, because it allowed me to deep dive into the politics of the city itself, which is something which I really love. So yeah, that was fun to write.
Super cool.
Yeah.
So it's like you have like the social caste system, but also sort of like a geographical caste system.
Yeah. I have to change the caste names, by the way, because that even I, with all my devilry, cannot tinker with that. Because if I had written the actual names, you have no idea who might. And some people obviously might get offended. And I didn't want to get cancelled before I even started writing. So that was
there's a lot of moving pieces. But a lot of authors talk about how difficult it can be to write the follow-up to the first book, and you've got your second book coming out very soon. So can you tell us a little bit about the challenges of writing that sequel? What was it like, especially because you're dealing with yet more new characters, and you kind of shift to, is it like a parallel timeline? Would you describe it? Take it away.
I think I'll go back to again my analogy of Stacy's mom versus Linkin Park. That band never had another hit. And obviously there are a lot of people who are one-hit wonders, and it happens, right? Sometimes when you don't, what is it called? Writers, basically you're not believing your own success because you feel that you're a fraud and you've just been lucky.
Like imposter syndrome.
Imposter syndrome. Why didn't that name not come into my head? Sometimes that happens. I felt that initially, and I was like, okay, I've taken a leap of faith with making writing my main career at this point of time, and I'm hoping that I'm able to do a decent job. I am loving what I'm writing, but I hope it works out. In the first book, I was trying to be the Indian GRRM, that was the whole North Star that was guiding me. In Dance of Shadows, I decided to be more GM, which is my initial, Gourav Mohanty. I don't know why it sounded a lot cooler in my head to say that. But so I think I enjoyed the process a lot more, because I felt that every scene, I just imagine these epic scenes. I'm going to bring them together. Whether they are reflected in some other book or not doesn't matter. It's going to be completely my story, because this will be a litmus test of whether I can stand on my own as an author or not. And hopefully I have, because when I read it, my editors read it, they all think that it's not bad. And it's definitely, I feel that a writer, and I feel that both of you guys will agree eventually, that when you write your second book, you've done a good job when your first book looks like shit compared to it, because you know that you've grown as a writer, because you look back and like, I wish I did this different, I wish my second book was my first book, because okay, I've done a decent job. So when I started feeling all these expressions of joy and regret that I wish I had written something similar in my first time, I realized that, okay, I'm doing a decent job. And that kind of helped with the anxiety that come. Of course, the book is going to release. And we all know, as in the publishing world and the author world, that any book series is like a pyramid, where you have a lot of readers for the first book, and that pyramid's less readers for the second book, because, some people might not have liked Sons of Darkness and would not buy the second book, or people don't buy the second book because they have not read the first book yet. So there's a pyramid that goes on. So all of these number game is also there in my head, but right now it's all in the periphery of the canvas, because right now I'm just enjoying the fact that I have written something which I'm proud of and which makes Sons of Darkness look horrible. So I'm glad that I trumped my own. My second born has beaten my first born, so which is awesome.
Yeah, and now you have a new favorite.
Yeah, I have a new
that's favorite. That's how it all happens. I love it though. I'm very glad that you're in that happy. I'm in like the weird limbo zone where I'm just like, I still feel like everything I write is like meh, and I'm still trying to like get past that point of, okay, Mushroom Blues is what it is, and that's how it exists, and all the success that it's had. I'm really happy about that, and I need to just get over that and like be able to move on to the next thing without that like that baggage. You know what I mean?
Absolutely.
This is like, I'll get there, but I'm really happy that you got there too.
And congratulations, I've seen Mushroom Blues everywhere.
You,
it's doing so well. So I can't wait to read it as well. It has such a Last of Us vibe, and that is one of my favorite PS4 games. So I'm really looking forward to diving into it. And especially when Greta, when you spoke about her book having heist is something which I've always wanted to write. So in Dance of Shadows, there's a heist as well.
And heist buddies.
Exactly, right? And I love Ocean's 11, okay? And I love how that flows. That's one of the greatest movies of all time. So I just thought, all my love for Ocean's 11 came in the second book as well. So I completely agree. I'm like, damn, this is... The moment you said heist, okay, I'm like, okay, can't wait to discuss heist.
Heisters is the best, man. They're great.
Yeah. Exactly.
I'll get there one day. I'll get there. I say it like every episode now.
One of us. One of us.
One of us. Oh, man. All right. So another challenge in series. So you're really happy with how book 2 turned out. You're really proud of what you have accomplished with that. But I think on like a story level, on a narrative level, a big challenge is kind of like upping the stakes that you set up in the first book. Especially it's like if you have a trilogy or anything more than 2 books, book 1 sets everything up. Yeah. Book 2 has to carry those stakes forward into the next book. Yeah. So how did you approach that to give readers that wonderful yet awful feeling that everything is still on the line, even though this is like a middle book now?
What I really like, especially when I read something, is when the personal stakes of the characters are horrible and they somehow tie up with the stakes of the world. I love the connection, and I think that makes for awesome reading, and that's what I wanted to do. That's something which I also learned from book 1, that I wanted to increase the personal because book 1 had a lot of world-ending defying stakes. Book 2 is a lot more personal in that nature, where every character has their own Pyrrhic victory to deal with. I think that's one essence of Grimdark. Like, no matter which step you take or which side you turn, you will get some gold along with that, a lot of dung, right? That's like the whole idea. So I just wanted to, like, there's a librarian princess who has to probably doom the world to save her sister from an ancient plague. I like that personal stake because it ties up with the world-ending plague, but it connects with her own sister. This pirate queen princess, this Mati character who's this Oscar Wilde Dorian Gray inspired thing, conscious, has no filter, blah blah blah. Now she's made these choices and very reckless choices, and the reverberations from that are coming to face her. And now she's realizing that she has to deal with those consequences and realize that maybe Oscar Wilde didn't have it all right. So I love dealing with that as well. To see that how does she get away with it while still retaining the essence of a character? I love creating trouble for my characters, and somehow this is something which I again enjoy from Steven Erikson books. They have these convergence chapters where basically there are so many characters, but they all come together at one place and something interesting happens, right? I love that journey where all these personal journeys come together and then it ties up with the whole world plot. And that is something which I really enjoy doing. So convergence chapters are my favorites, and Sons of Darkness have 2 convergence chapters. This one, Dance of Shadows, has 3. So yeah, this one.
Oh, that's going to be awesome stakes, because those convergence chapters were killers. But well, speaking of killers and those convergence chapters, your books are, I guess, very graphic in their terms or their depictions of violence, and particularly battle scenes, which were really very well done. But it never really felt like you were including those depictions of violence just as like shock value. So how do you use, as a writer, violence and action sequences as a way to not only further plot, but also illustrate maybe the themes you're trying to write toward, or the characters and how they're growing over the course of the book and the series?
Yeah, absolutely. I think violence, which will sound funny, to be read well, at least in the books which I've read and which I try to write, is violence should be organic. I know it sounds like a horrible statement in isolation, but when it comes to writing these books, I feel that it is interlaced with the storyline, where it does not feel like it's been introduced as a shock value. And here I'm going to slightly deviate, and I can take the name because she's so famous and I love her books. But this is why I did not like Poppy War. Okay, out of Cons. I love the mythology she brings in, and it's amazing, and it goes on well. But towards the end of Poppy War, and I've discussed this with Patrick Leo as well, because he also loves that series. there's just suddenly a lot of violence that takes place in the last 2-3 chapters, and even those violent scenes are all taken from the actual war that took place, the Sino-Japan war. So it just felt very pushed at the end. It did not feel layered, where it does not feel, it's like a seed that germinates, but when it is suddenly artificially planted, that it's plastic and synthetic. I'm not saying that's what happened in that case, but for me, it took me out of that experience. I didn't want to do that, because I love reading where the violence is interlaced with humor, and these violent actions that take place further a character's growth. I think those are the best kind of violent scenes or action scenes that are there, that which lead to such a wow, word salad, such a sudden change in the character's reaction to things or understanding of things, that you feel that okay, this was necessary for the character's arc, and then that feels like great. For example, I'm not using an example from my book. I'll try and use a very famous example. Brienne of Tarth fighting that bear in a stage, and that the soldiers are going to mistreat her. So it's obviously graphic violence hasn't taken place, but sometimes the writer leaves it to your imagination, which is a lot worse. But that was so important, because that brought out Jaime Lannister's character, because he was ready to sacrifice whatever he had going to come and save Brienne of Tarth. And suddenly you see this other side of him, which ends with his hand being cut, something which he's so obsessed with, his sword skill. And that was so beautifully done. And that's what I wanted to bring here as well. The wars that happen in Sons of Darkness, or the assaults that happen in Sons of Darkness, how do they change the person, leading them to take a decision which they would not normally take? Right? And that happens to all of us as well in our lives, when suddenly you maybe fail in an exam, which obviously in the grand scheme of things does not look violent, but when you're failed in that exam, you realize, oh, this could be the worst thing that could happen to us. So when you do that, and then you realize that, okay, how this has changed me. I love those tiny character nuggets, defining milestones in life, if I may say so. So that's what I want to do, make the violent scenes milestones in that character's journey, and that really helps. But yeah, talking about the violent scenes, you said that they're graphic. I know, because my father keeps saying, I can't read the book. I never knew you had so much darkness in you. And Adrian, I am not making this up. I told them today that I'm having this interview and discussion with Greta and Adrian. These are folks I met at World College. Like, Adrian is the guy who said you have a heart of darkness. He was so correct about you. So he remembers your little nugget about me. But yeah,
just tell your dad. It's just like, I just read your son, man. Just pick that up. Yeah, a little cinnamon bun with the heart of caramel darkness. Dad. Yeah, you raised me.
Yeah, it's called Son of Darkness.
Just turn it around and throw it back at him.
Or are you the dark one?
Oh my God. You can tell Greta's a mom. Oh my God, I love it. Well, buddy, thank you so much. We're gonna close out with a 2-part question. If you can give listeners and viewers a good bit of soundbite writing advice, and then B, to tell us a weird or random fact that you find to be utterly fascinating.
Okay, so writing advice, this is not my advice, but this is something which really helped me. It's by Stephen King. It says that don't aim for a perfect first draft. And that is such a beautiful piece of advice, because I have seen other writers who I've spoken with get stuck because they're editing a chapter constantly while they're writing. And that slows them down, because the number of time my story, the way it starts and the book which is ultimately published, they're completely different, because obviously you're going through this evolution process. But I think that's something but when you judge yourself too harshly for the first draft that you have written, I think you are being unfair to yourself and to the process. I think you just finish the story, look at it again, and I think that would be wonderful. Something which I learned on my own, which I haven't read in any other book, is that first-time writers just enjoy the journey, because if you worry too much about the destination, which is finishing the book, the process will become artificial and it will introduce anxieties in your life. So just enjoy torturing your characters or just exploring new worlds, whatever gets you going, and just enjoy that process and journey. I think you'll have a lot of fun.
Let out your inner darkness. And then throw it in your parents' faces.
Sorry. Okay, fun. Some interesting fact which I learned. I was looking at epochs and time, and I came across such a beautiful thing that the T-Rex. I'm a Jurassic Park fan, not the Chris Pratt ones, the OG ones. the T-Rex is closer to us in time than the T-Rex was to the Stegosaurus. Stegosaurus is basically the dinosaur which had spines across his back until his tail. They show the scene where a T-Rex is fighting a Stegosaurus in one of the Jurassic Park movies. And then someone came on Reddit and said, but the difference between those two dinosaurs is longer than the difference between the T-Rex and us in time. And I was like, man, we are just
crazy,
this whole thing that we're just a speck in the universe timeline is just unbelievably.
It's the same as like Cleopatra is closer to the invention of the iPhone than she is to the creation of the pyramids.
Pyramids, yeah. Again,
so it's like there's like crazy, there's like crazy time differentials that it's like we just like history just squishes things together in like this very skewed way.
Right? Yeah. But I think Nietzsche read all these facts before he came up with his existential crisis philosophies about God is dead and that he's nothing matters. So, I'm sure he read all of these information.
Well, on that fantastical dinosaur note, Gourav, thank you so much for hanging out with Greta and I. It's been an absolute pleasure, my friend.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me. It's been a good Worldcon reunion and I love it. Looking forward to the next.
Yeah. And go support Gourav. You can go pick up Sons of Darkness, which is available now. Dance of Shadows, which is out on February 25th in the US, North America, probably like a couple days later in the UK.
Yeah.
So go support our beautiful cinnamon bun right here. Support his dark side. Go get those. Go get his chunky books. As well, if you contribute $5 or more to our Patreon, you can access a reading by Gourav from Dance of Shadows. So go check that out. And Gourav, if you could please let everyone know where they can find you online.
You can find me. This is always an embarrassing portion of any interview. You can find me on Instagram. My handle is The King Beyond the Wall. I made that ID when I was a JRM fan and I didn't want to change it. As evident by the fact that when I did run into George R.R. Martin in Worldcon, instead of telling him something eloquent, I told him, "You are everything," which was embarrassing moments in hindsight.
That's beautiful, though.
You're my everything, Gio.
It was captured on video. It was just like it was. I mean, I was living in my memory. I could have denied it. There was plausible deniability. But so my Insta handle is The King Beyond the Wall, and on Twitter I'm at Mohanty Gourav 7 something, because 7 is the most powerful magic number, or so I believe when I was reading Harry Potter. But yeah. This is a website also which I created with a lot of difficulty using during the pandemic using tutorials from WordPress. It's called GouravMohanty.com. Just check it out. It was a lot of hard work that went into it. So, yeah, I'm really proud of it.
Fantastic. Right on, buddy. You can also follow SFF Addicts on all the platforms at SFF Addicts Pod. You can follow me at Adrian M. Gibson. You can go check out Mushroom Blues if you want some fungi in your life. Greta, where can people find you?
I'm at all the places at Greta K. Kelly, mostly on Instagram these days. And you can find all of my books, including The Queen of Days, wherever you buy books. And it's basically what happens when your D&D group decides to go steal from a fallen god and rolls natural ones on all their stealth checks. There is also a free companion short story to newsletter subscribers. So go check that out if you want a little bit of extra taste of the chaos gremlins that are my babies.
And go support MJ and her cat Thorin, because Thorin needs food and MJ needs to quit her day job. So go buy her books and help her out on that. That's it for this episode. Stay tuned next week for part 2 with Gourav for a mini masterclass on mythological retellings. For now, keep reading, keep imagining, and we'll see you next time on SFF Addicts.